My son took me for granted because for years I let gratitude do a job that belongs to governance. So at the very event where he planned to push me aside, I decided it was time to change the rules. I didn't bring a speech. I brought resolutions, printed and ready to be signed. This is the story of how I took everything back, not by raising my voice, but by resetting the system. Some lessons don't arrive as thunder. They come folded inside ordinary hours. Steam off a kettle at 5:30, the first scrape of a chair on a diner floor, the cashier's drawer counting back to float. I used to think disrespect would sound like a slam. In my town, it goes soft-shoed and smiling, calling itself progress, asking for your keys in a tone that expects a thank you. If you've ever run a small business beside an airport through a Newfoundland winter, you learn that survival is almost embarrassingly practical. You learn to love what holds: good rubber on a door sweep, salt in a lidded bucket, the way a ledger keeps its lines straight no matter who thinks his ideas are straighter. I'm Ruth McAllister. I'm 58, a widow, and I run Harbor Light, a diner bakery with 4 rooms for crew layovers upstairs, 2 blocks off the main drag in Gander. We got our second wind when the flight stopped short here the year the world shut down and some people discovered that pies and clean sheets could feel like mercy. I opened before dawn because pilots and ground staff favor the kind of coffee that tastes like an apology they won't have to make. The rooms upstairs are simple. Duvets that don't look fragile, blackout curtains that mean what they say, a tray with kettle, mugs, and the good tea bags, not the ones I keep for my own late nights. I live in the little space behind the kitchen that used to be dry goods storage. The wall between work and home is an honest door with a decent lock, and I sleep better for it. On a January morning, you can hear your breath here. I'm up at 4:45. I pad into the kitchen and read the room like a dog reads weather. The Hobart mixer waits. The proofer hums. The walk-in exhales a polite cold on my face when I open it to check dough. I set the kettle on because the first mercy of the day should be yours. I grind beans. The grinder argues, then agrees. I run a finger along the prep table's edge to feel for any nick that would bother a cloth later. I check the grease trap like a ritual. I preheat the oven, wipe the glass, and set the first batch of cinnamon buns like a small congregation. I slide the tray in, close the door, and watch the temperature settle. Not because it needs me, but because I like steadiness. I turn on the neon sign in the window, Harbor Light, in that soft pink blue that makes snow look like it's considering forgiveness. It flickers once, the way old things do when they decide to try again. 6 o'clock comes, and with it, the first regular, a de-icing crew lead who drinks his coffee black and reads the paper like words owe him nothing. We speak in sentences that don't ask for answers. He sits. I pour. He nods. A ground handler on the late shift shows up next. His hands smell like jet fuel in winter. He asks for a breakfast sandwich with double egg. I crack the shells like a person cracking a knuckle she trusts. The grill behaves. Bacon sings. The ticket rail starts to look like a list of reasons to be alive. By 7, the morning is a conversation you can navigate without looking up. 2 flight attendants in their stubbornly cheerful scarves wrap their hands around their mugs and let their shoulders drop. The young ramp agent who's saving for a car orders, "Whatever came out of the oven first," and gets a bun he will swear I made for him. I smile because I did and didn't. At 7:30, I carry the tray of muffins to the case and write the names on the board in my careful capital letters. Chocolate chip, blueberry, bran with dates. No fancy words. The pride's in the taste. I restock the counter with stir sticks and stand for a second in the doorway to the little corridor that leads to the stairs. The landing smells like heat, laundry soap, and something clean. Last night's crew left the rooms tidy. I'd made the beds in 3 quick movements each, smoothed without pretending I was part of a magazine, and checked the kettles as if tea had ever saved me less than coffee. My son Caleb drifts in around 10, the hour he has begun to call my start time, like the day waits on him to commit. He's 33, handsome like he knows it, with a beard he trims more seriously than he balances a statement. He used to call the diner old-fashioned. He and his wife, Sierra, moved home after a startup in Halifax collapsed under the weight of adjectives. They asked if they could help me scale. I said yes because I'm a mother before I'm a business school, and also because I could use a hand if the hand understood the difference between a fryer and a mood. I added him to the bank login so he could pay a supplier once when I was at a funeral, then never got around to removing that access because neither of us likes certain kinds of conversations. I gave him a supplementary card for inventory emergencies and told myself the word emergency would be a fence. Fences only work if the people in the field remember their legs. Sierra is 31 and runs freelance marketing from our back booth, broken into sprints by selfies and small bites of croissant. She says things like brand refresh in a tone that asks you to adore her for remembering to include you. She redesigned our Instagram with a grid that looks like it was laid down by someone who loves overcast more than daylight. She has a taste for pastel and a habit of signing emails as the Harbor Light team, when the team in question has been paying utilities for longer than she has been alive. 2 years ago, when Caleb's startup sank, I went to the bank and increased my mortgage. The manager, a kind man with a widow's heavy smile, looked at me once, twice, then printed the forms anyway because he knows me and knows I sign what I can carry. I sold the old Ford Ranger for enough to replace the Hobart's belt and buy an oven that doesn't change its mind mid-bake. I set up a sub-account for HST so taxes didn't feel like a trick. I trained Caleb on the POS and showed him how to reconcile the Z report against the cash, the debit, and the stray bill a customer insists on leaving despite your attempts at a perfect till. For a while, it felt like this could work. Then the little phrase, a latte machine I didn't need, appeared with a lease I never signed, a photography package billed to the card the week we were behind on flour. Content, Sierra said, drives conversion. Conversion doesn't pay Dominion Bakery for the 90-kilo sacks of bread flour. A month later, an invoice from the coffee roaster was 30 days past due when we have never been later than 10. Oh, Caleb said, cheeks pink with the embarrassment he tries to mask with charm. I'm batching payments to optimize cash flow. He used the phrase like a bandage on a check that has bounced. When I asked about HST, he said the portal was fussy. It times out, he shrugged. I stood in front of the screen and watched it time in. I paid online and wrote him a note in the old-school cash book anyway. He smiled and kissed my cheek and said I was adorable when I went analog. I am not adorable when I go analog. I am documented. The invitation to the Customer Appreciation Night came as a bundle of decisions nobody had asked me to bless. Sierra had designed the slide deck with gradients that made me feel seasick. Caleb had booked a local musician who deserved better lighting than the one we own. I baked too many bars because bars make any room behave. The sign over the door, the one Bill and I had painted ourselves a lifetime ago when I still believed paint could be persuaded by patience, was covered by a temporary canvas that read, Caleb's Harbor. Sierra said it was just for the event. She said it in the voice of someone who never scraped a frost heave off the back stoop at 4:30 in the morning. Customers came. The loyal ones with their quiet money, the new ones who wanted to be near something that felt like a moment. I wore my good apron, the one with pockets deep enough to hold a pad, a pen, and a secret. The band took a break. Sierra took the mic. She thanked me for the legacy. She led applause. Then Caleb stepped up like a boy who had practiced his smile in a mirror that is kind to him. Big news, he said, and the room gave him its permission. We're refreshing, we're modernizing, we're taking Harbor to the next level. From today forward, the business is operated by Caleb & Co. Mum will be our honorary advisor. Honorary, that gown they drape over your shoulders to keep you from catching the cold while they steal your coat. The slide behind him said, Founded by Caleb 2025. Founded. Sierra's friends whooped. My regulars clapped with their hands and stared with their eyes. The band pretended to tune and failed. I did what women like me do when a room changes the gravity without warning. I cleared plates that didn't need clearing. I refilled water glasses belonging to people who weren't thirsty. I wiped the counter even though it was clean. I smiled because dignity doesn't like to be caught with her hair uncombed. The pilots said thank you with their eyebrows. The ground crew put a 20 in the tip jar like penance. The universe reminded me that Saturdays end, whether or not you believe in the days that follow. When the last of the crowd had taken their selfies under the canvas sign, I went to the office. It's a small room off the kitchen. Cinder block walls, filing cabinet that bows like an old man but still stands. A desk that used to belong to a hair salon and is better now that it has grease on it. I closed the door, not to be dramatic, to keep the sound of the kitchen from asking me to cheer up. I pulled the bottom drawer of the cabinet and took out the things that don't negotiate. Business registration in my name, renewed on schedule because I can read. The insurance policy with my name listed as the insured party, not team. The lease addendum for the upstairs rooms. The letter from the bank acknowledging my personal guarantee on the line of credit we took during the oven purchase. The mortgage increase papers. Signature lines neat and naive. I set them in a line, not like a threat, like a story. I'm not sentimental about paper. I am faithful to it. I open the ledger book that we still keep under the cash desk because technology fails the way mornings never do. I flip back through months where the left side, sales, cash, debit, EFT, had behaved, and the right side, purchases, wages, HST, had made sense. I saw the week the HST got late. I saw the day the platform subscription doubled because someone clicked premium in a mood. I found the coffee roaster invoice under the dishwash tab's order in the file because I file like a woman who doesn't want to owe anyone anything she can avoid. I took notes on an index card we use for specials. I wrote without adjectives. Past due, roaster, latte lease, unapproved, camera, supplementary card, free room, collab, no record of approval. I checked the upstairs key log. 2 nights last week read, comped content partner. The handwriting was Sierra's. I felt my throat go hot and refused to let my hands enjoy the feeling. I pulled the room contracts from the binder, the clause that keeps me sane at midnight when a stranger wants to be my friend. No complimentary stays except by owner's written authorization. Owner is not a mood board. Owner is me. I did not march back into the dining room and tear the canvas down. I took the small steel safe out from under the desk and counted the roll float. Quarters, loonies, toonies, the petty cash envelope with its careful arithmetic. It added up to the penny. I felt better, the way a person feels better when the earth under her is not as interested in metaphors as people are. I put everything in a red folder I keep for moments when rooms are lying to themselves. I wrote on the tab with a label maker Sierra bought for me to make branded spice jars, and I wasted on clarity. Facts, not feelings. Caleb walked in then, took stock of the air, and grinned like the air had failed to impress him. "Mom, you're overreacting," he said, which is a sentence that makes me go very still. Everything's handled. We've got momentum. You can just bake and relax. Out past the window, a plow went by, throwing crystals into the street like a miser throwing rice. Sunday morning, the de-icers brought their hunger and their gossip. "New sign looked cheap," one said blandly. "Coffee's the same," another said. And that was, for them, a poetic defense of me. I worked. I made change. I fielded Caleb's breezy texts about content shoots and Sierra's notes about consistent mirrors in the washrooms for brand tone. I replaced the paper towel roll. I scrubbed the sink until it believed in my effort. Monday is my paperwork day. I turned the closed sign and boiled a pot for dishcloths because bleach belongs in some moments like clarity belongs in all of them. I logged into the bank and watched numbers behave badly. Transfers out labeled event cash, consulting, gear. The HST subaccount, blessed be her, sat fat and intact because I had set it to move automatically on Fridays, whether we were in the mood or not. The line of credit had been used, twice. Vendor deposits, the memo said, with a date that matched the latte lease. I printed everything in a stack with a cover sheet that said, "Who clicked this?" When the kitchen cooled, I climbed the stairs and stripped the beds, wiped the kitchenette counters that good men pretend not to see, checked the kettles to make sure the little descaling tablets had done more than look like effort. The room with the collab guest. Sierra had left a gift bag and a thank you note for a person whose job is to call things cute. The guest had recorded a room tour and posted it with hashtags that, I suppose, mean something to people who know how to care beautifully and briefly. She had not washed her mug. At 4, Caleb and Sierra came in, warm from success. "Did you see the metrics?" Sierra said. "Our reel is blowing up." "And you," Caleb said, reaching to put his arm around me like a boy who remembers he is the son of a woman who can fix his comfort with a slice of pie, are officially our honorary advisor. "I am the owner," I said, not loud. I lifted the red folder half an inch off the counter and set it back down like a person placing a sleeping baby back in a bassinet. "Owner, insured, and the only signature on the room, contracts, and the business registration." He laughed, because good men laugh when they don't know what else to do. "We're saying the same thing," he lied. "We're not," I said, and put plates under 2 bowls of soup, because hunger makes people listen worse, and I wanted them to feel ready to hear later. That evening, the roaster called, looking for a promise I keep so they can keep their vans running. "Late," he said unhappily. "We never had you late, Ruth." "You won't have me late again," I said. I paid him from the sub-account I keep, not because I enjoy being a safety net, but because I don't like seeing good men worry. After I hung up, I wrote, "Roaster paid 30 days late. Ask Caleb why" in my sulky teacher printing. I smiled at myself because pettiness, indulged on paper, doesn't leak into what matters. An old friend, a retired CRA auditor who eats pie every Wednesday because he believes in balance, came in to buy a loaf. He asked after me the way men ask when they mean business. "They're rebranding," I said. He looked at the canvas on the sign, then at me. "You're the owner," he said, making the words do the job of handing me a tool. "Yes," I said. He took his loaf like a man signing a witness line and left me a tip too big for a loaf. I put it in the jar labeled Crew Coffees and wrote down his name, not because the CRA cares, but because the past should be thanked as frankly as it arrives. The worst of the small bullyings happened Tuesday. I came in from the back with a bag of potatoes on my shoulder and heard Sierra arguing sweetly with a supplier on speakerphone. "Switch the account contact to Caleb," she was saying. "We'll handle the orders from now on." I set the potatoes down, wiped my hands, and took the phone. "No," I said to the air, then to the man on the line. "Harbor Light remains under Ruth McAllister for ordering and contracts. Please keep the account in my name." "Of course, Ruth," he said, the relief in his voice an accident. I hung up. Sierra turned the kind of color people turn when their favorite trick has been removed from the table before dessert. "We're just trying to professionalize," she said. "Professional is paying the flower bill on time," I said. "Professional is not offering rooms for free to strangers who don't spend money on the things that keep lights on." Caleb walked in then, took stock of the air, and grinned like the air had failed to impress him. "Mum, you're overreacting," he said, which is a sentence that makes me go very still. "Everything's handled. We've got momentum. You can just bake and relax." Out past the window, a plow went by, throwing crystals into the street like a miser throwing rice. Professional is not rebranding your mother. Caleb walked in then, took stock of the air, and grinned like the air had failed to impress him. "Mum, you're overreacting," he said, which is a sentence that makes me go very still. "Everything's handled. We've got momentum. You can just bake and relax." Out past the window, a plow went by, throwing crystals into the street like a miser throwing rice. When a person talks to you about your life as if it's a hobby you ought to be relieved to surrender, something old and practical inside you makes a decision. Mine did. I did not cry. I did not read him his own invoices aloud. I took a pen from the jar by the till and wrote a list with a quiet hand. Bank appointment, insurer call, public health permit review, locks, passwords, POS users, HST calendar, room contract audit, legal. I called the woman at the credit union because she likes me and likes numbers more. I called my insurance broker and told him neutrally there was a change in management involvement, and I wanted to confirm our coverage terms, named insureds, and the implications of unofficial events. He said the word document like a benediction and told me to put it all in an email so his underwriter could treat me the way a friend treats a person she would like to keep. I wrote the email in the back booth after the lunch rush, when the soup had run out and the only sound in the room was the dishwasher resolving its own arguments. I attached scans, registration, policy, lease, room clause, last inspection. I wrote dates like I was putting name tags on people who had earned their chairs. At closing, I counted the till with the new girl from the high school because she'll be taking over Sunday breakfasts in June, if exams are kind. She likes to write the numbers longhand because it feels slower and more honest that way. I like her already. I showed her how to cash out and where to record the variance. It came to 0. We high-fived like bored saints and swept the floor twice because the first sweep never catches salt. Midweek, a reporter from the local paper called. "We hear there's a rebrand," she said, careful. "Would you like to comment?" "Not on rebranding," I said. "On baking," she said, as if to give me a rope. "On baking," I agreed. I answered questions about yeast and patience and how you know a muffin tin that has lived long enough to be called wise. She put a photograph of my hands in the paper the next day and captioned it with the name of the diner. That is still mine. The appreciation night disappeared into a Tuesday. That's the mercy and the sorrow of real life. We still needed dish soap. A boy still forgot his lunch and bought a bagel and paid in nickels. The furnace filter still needed to be changed in the small closet off room 3 because fur from a pet someone snuck in will not apologize for how it loves what it loves. The bin still had to be lugged out behind the building. The canvas sign still hung, pretending at ownership under a sky that never asked for permission to be clouded. I do not pretend I wasn't hurt. Hurt is a small, mean dog that chews on what you thought you had trained. It nipped my ankles all day. I let it. I kept moving. In the office, I pulled the old metal safe out again and put a copy of each critical document in the red folder. Business registration, insurance, mortgage, bank guarantee, lease, room contracts, HST remittances. I added the latte lease and the camera receipt to a section labeled unauthorized. I printed the Instagram post that used the words "Founded by Caleb 2025" and put it under a clip with the original photograph of me and Bill the day we replaced the first sign together with the teenage boys from next door. He is looking at the camera like he believed in my pie more than in luck. I put my hand on the photograph and told it I was working on it. Before bed, I sat in my little kitchen behind the diner and made a tea I would not drink because the point was to watch the steam and feel the way a day arrives and leaves regardless of what anyone says about it. I laid a notebook open and wrote a sentence that felt like it might save me from speeches I would regret. The money you borrow from your mother is a bill. The kindness you borrow is too. Not legal language, but useful. I put the notebook under the red folder to make it heavier. There will be a meeting at the bank, a call with the insurer, a conversation with public health about permits and names. There will be a letter to suppliers, registered, that says the person who signs has grown tired of watching signatures get treated like emojis. There will be locks rekeyed without fuss. There will be a password reset done like laundry, without announcements, because clean is the point. There will be a date on the calendar marked for a small, uncomfortable event, because some truths prefer chairs. You'll hear about it from me when I've got the papers laid out and the coffee pot full, because a woman can confront her son's habits and still feed the people who didn't ask to be in the room when families teach themselves manners. For now, I will open at 5:30, preheat the oven, and drop dough into tins, and get on with the business of making something rise that chose not to rise yesterday. I will look at the line where batter meets heat and say aloud to the empty kitchen, "Not today, not like this." The kitchen will happily ignore me. It answers only to time and temperature, both of which have taught me more about respect than a slide ever could. Some reckonings don't raise their voice. They sharpen their pencil, pick a good envelope, and stand in a bank line with their gloves tucked in their pocket so both hands are free for signing. You can call it petty if you like. I call it winter wisdom. In Newfoundland, we don't shout a storm down. We stack wood before it hits. After the night my son renamed my diner with a canvas and a smile, I stacked wood. Paper first. Then voice. Then, if decency leaves me a little room, pie. Monday started with the hard quiet of a kitchen before service. I boiled cloths in a pot with enough bleach to make the counters almost tell the truth about me. I counted the float, wrote the date on the tape atop the roll of toonies, and put the red folder in my tote, like a woman putting a baby into a snowsuit. I took a photograph of the ledger page open beside the POSZ report, not for Instagram, for memory's thumb. Then I turned the sign to closed and walked to the credit union. Ice squeaked under my boots in the exact way ice should when a person is about to mend her life. The manager knows me by my handwriting. He's got that look people get in towns like ours where being a banker is just being a neighbor with keys. I slid my ID and the red folder across. 2 things, I said. Withdraw my guarantee on any new advances against the line and implement dual signatures for transfers over 500. He did not blink. He printed. We read. We signed. He asked if I wanted a new web login and a fresh set of security questions that didn't include my son's birthday. He meant well. Yes, I said, and include a note on the profile. Owner must approve additional users. He tapped and typed. The printer sang. He placed a copy of each document on his side of the desk with that nice old-fashioned precision that makes you remember men used to sharpen pencils because it made their thinking neater. Next, I took the long desk by the wall and wrote 3 registered letters by hand before typing them, because words behave when they pass once through a pen. The first to the insurer, notice of change in management involvement and request to confirm named insureds, event coverage conditions, and the requirement for owner sign-off on safety plans. The second to public health, affirmation of my status as permit holder, request to schedule a routine inspection, and a note reminding them that complimentary rooms include kettles and that kettles, like people, need standards attached. The third to our 2 biggest suppliers, the roaster and the flour man, stating that as of today, only orders bearing my signature and purchase order number would be honored. I tucked the receipts for registered mail into the red folder under a new tab I made out of a sticky note. Proof it went where it should. Back at Harbor Light, I changed the locks on the office and the upstairs supply closet. There's an art to rekeying that is less like violence and more like a stern letter to a hinge. I set the new keys on a ring and wrote the numbers down in a little grid I keep in the drawer. I know who has which copy because I refuse to repeat the afternoon I crawled under a counter, looking for a spares tin I would have found if my past self had been a friend. At 11, the roaster's van pulled in. The driver, boy from Bishop's Falls who still calls me Miss Ruth, even though nobody has asked me to be a miss in 40 years, lugged in the sacks. Heard there was a party, he said, not prying. There was a party, I said. Today, we're paying bills for it. He laughed, set his tote on the counter, and signed the delivery slip while I handed him a check from the HST sub-account and the printed proof of our auto transfers working like obedient angels. Your boy's the charming type, he said, folding the check with care. Charm doesn't keep a grinder from seizing, I said. He nodded like men nod when they know a sentence deserves to sit alone for a minute. In the lull between lunch orders, I opened the POS admin and performed a small surgery. Permissions are a polite way to say love yourself in advance. I removed 2 user profiles that didn't belong in a kitchen. I lowered Caleb's clearance from owner to manager sales only. And I turned off the ability to issue refunds without 2 codes. I printed the new user list and taped it in the safe, then taped another copy inside the closet door where only Flower and I would see it. I didn't announce any of it, not because I love secrecy, but because announcements are for birthdays. Boundaries can be quiet. The phone lit up with Sierra calling from the back booth. We prefer to use phones instead of walking because texting trains a person to skip tone. Quick thing, she said. I moved some influencer room nights into next month so we can stretch the campaign. Can you update the bookings? I took a breath the way you take a breath before a stitch that must be perfect. No, I said. All comp stays are canceled. Owner's authorization is required. There isn't any. She started to sell me the concept of buzz. I started to wonder whether I could tax buzz like I tax cinnamon. Book-paying guests, I said. Buzz can buy a muffin and leave a tip. She hung up with the sigh of a woman denied her favorite shortcut. At 2:15, the email from the insurer arrived. Subject line, coverage clarification, Harbor Light, body. Event coverage contingent upon owner-approved safety plan, adherence to occupancy limits, and the presence of the named permit holder for food operations. I printed it, dog-eared the corner, and slid it behind the health inspection from last spring. I put a star next to the line that would later keep a room full of people from pretending my caution was mean-spirited. Caution is a kind of mothering. Caleb breezed in at 3 wearing a new hoodie with a logo that looked like a boat afraid of work. He kissed my temple in front of the servers because he knows affection buys him a minute. Great news, he said. I booked a live rebrand reveal with the paper next Friday. We'll have a pop-up bar, a small bites menu, Sierra's curating, and a short speech. You just do your thing and look adorable. I set a rack of cooling buns on the table because hot sugar keeps my hands from doing anything they'll make me talk about later. We're closed next Friday from 6 to 8, I said. Health inspection. He laughed like I had tried a joke with the wrong timing. I didn't repeat myself. I slipped the inspection confirmation email into the red folder's Kitchen Permits tab and wrote a small note on the calendar by the back door, wash under the hand sink twice. The next morning, I sorted the receipts from the past 30 days and put a blue dot next to every purchase with the supplementary card that didn't smell like flour, meat, eggs, milk, or soap. Blue dots look like a sky I didn't ask for. I ran the total. It was not impossible, but it was mean. I made a repayment schedule that assumed decency and a slower month, half to the card, half to the oven fund, because a future with both felt kinder than a lecture. I clipped the schedule to the stack and wrote calendar above it because if it lives there, shame can't turn it into poetry. Then I called the lawyer who helped me rewrite the upstairs lease after a visiting team decided to meet a fire extinguisher, like a friend. She has that brisk compassion that doctors and bakers share. I need 3 documents, I said. A resolution stating that contracts over a certain amount require 2 signatures, a revocation of any non-owner authority for bank access and vendor accounts, and a notice to suppliers that complimentary rooms are against policy without my written go-ahead. Busy week, she said. Busy month, I corrected. Make it harder to decide without me. She laughed, but with me. We set a time for me to sign, and she told me to bring the red folder like she was asking me to bring yeast to a church supper. It just doesn't giggle. I went to public health at noon because appointments do not scare a woman who is mopped behind a freezer. The inspector, a soft-spoken woman with a fearsome nose for thermometers that tell lies, met me with a clipboard and the look of someone who values boredom in kitchens. We scheduled the inspection. I asked for extra pamphlets on allergen control and posted one in the staff area where nobody ever pretends reading is beneath them. She looked at the canvas sign through the window and then at my face. Names on registrations and signs should match, she said. They will, I said. In the afternoon, Sierra sent a mass email. Caleb & Coer is now live, soft launch Friday. The press release used my oven as a photo background and my hands as a prop. I replied with a single sentence and 3 attachments. Please see attached, business registration, permit, insurance email. I CC'd the paper, politely, and included a line from the insurer's email that sang in a small voice even printers can hear. Event coverage is contingent upon owner approval. Sierra replied with a string of sparkles and a heart. Hearts are cute, so are potholders. Only one keeps you alive. Wednesday evening, I found Caleb at the till with his hands in the drawer. The drawer opened because he'd watched me 1,000 times, not because it wanted him. Event cash, he said. Easier to roll it through petty. I stood beside him and waited for my own patience to sit back down. "We balance petty nightly," I said. "No event cash. It isn't the 70s and we aren't a church raffle." He made a joke about how everything I do is retro. I made a note on the Zud report that night. $0 petty out counted with Layla. Variance, 0. Leela drew a little heart next to her name because teenagers understand that sometimes love is doing the thing adults claim they don't have time for, like counting to the penny. Thursday morning, the flour truck broke down on TCH, and a mechanic with a low tolerance for nonsense fixed it with a socket and a prayer. We baked from the back of the freezer and the grace of good planning. Between batches, I went upstairs and replaced the smoke detector batteries. The beeps we pretend not to hear are the ones that get us. I wrote the date in Sharpie on the back of the detectors so my future self would not swear she had done it yesterday. By afternoon, word got around because this is a town and kitchens can be chatty without malice. The paper called. "We were sent 2 press releases for the same Friday," the reporter said delicately. "Which one's yours?" "The one that reads like a safety manual," I said. She liked that. She asked if she could photograph the inspection tools on the wall. I said yes and wiped them not because they were dirty, but because polished caution is a better look than pretty courage. Caleb tried one more time that night, in that low-voiced way he has when he remembers I used to tuck him in, even when he had grown too long for the bed I can afford. "Mom," he said, "you're making this harder than it needs to be. You raised me to dream bigger than a diner." He meant it. He means every good thing he says, right up until a bill arrives. "I raised you to pay your bills," I said. "I raised you to say sorry when you forget to." He looked at the canvas on the door and then at me. "It's just an event," he said. "It's just my life," I said, and I wished immediately I had softened it. Sometimes a mother gets to tell the truth, even when she doesn't like how it sounds in her own mouth. Friday came with a sky like clean paper. The inspector arrived at 6 for the booked inspection because morning is the time a kitchen tells you who she really is. We checked probe thermometers, sanitizer concentration, cooling logs, allergen sheets. We danced the little dances that people who respect rules dance, me leading in some steps, her in others. She signed the sheet and left me a copy. I tacked it on the corkboard under the recipe for molasses cake my grandmother wrote in a hand that looked like winter-learned manners. At 10, the lawyer emailed the documents. I printed them and felt something in my shoulders climb down the ladder it had been stuck on all week. The resolution for 2 signatures, the revocation of authority, the notice to suppliers, the sample repayment agreement for the card, the template email to upstairs guests clarifying that reservations must be paid at the time of booking. I signed where I needed to, left lines for counter signatures, and put them in the front of the red folder. I slid the old photograph of Bill and me behind the last sleeve because the old day deserved to ride shotgun. I posted a small sign in the staff room where people actually look. No complimentary stays, no event cash, 2 signatures for orders over $300. Staff meeting Sunday afternoon. I left a plate of bars under it to make the message feel like hospitality instead of a law. It is possible to be both. By noon, Sierra's soft launch flyers had started appearing on the community board at the grocery. I pulled one down and smiled a little at the font that tried to be old-timey without knowing how to be cold. I pinned our inspection result next to the spot where her flyer had been. I know petty. I also know what most people in this town want to see tacked to a wall, proof a woman knows her temperatures. In the late afternoon, I called the upstairs long-term guests, the pilot who rotates in weekly, the dispatcher who uses room 2 when storms laugh at her car, the Air Canada flight attendant who likes room 4 because the radiator knocks less there. I told them there would be a short private event next Friday with media present and reassured them that quiet hours would be respected and no room would be given away for a campaign. They laughed the way people laugh when they didn't ask to be involved with slogans. The pilot asked if I would hold his favorite mug back from the dishwasher that night. I did. At closing, I pulled the old sign from under the canvas just a few inches, the way a person lifts a quilt to check on a sleeping dog. Harbor Light looked back at me. Paint nicked where the wind keeps its own counsel. I slid the canvas back down because this is not that kind of story. I'm not a woman for tearing. I'm a woman for letters. Before I slept, I wrote to Caleb, not a text. A letter on paper from the pad we keep for supplier notes. Son, I wrote. Friday is an inspection, not a launch. It's also a line. From now on, 2 signatures for orders. No comped rooms without my written authorization. No use of the business registration number without my consent. Repayment schedule attached for charges not related to operations. I am not your enemy. I am your mother and your partner in something that feeds you and this town. The name on the sign is older than a canvas. It won't be moved by sparkles. Paper first, then voice. I didn't leave it under his pillow. I set it in the red folder and tucked the folder under my arm while I turned off the kitchen lights, one bank at a time, so the darkness would learn to trust me. Saturday morning opened like a book I had read before but still liked. We were busy. People brought their appetites and their opinions and left their coats on chairs like Faith. Sierra came in late and ordered a latte I made with the new machine because I am not a barbarian. She drank it and said nothing at all, which is a kind of kindness left unwrapped. Caleb arrived with a boyish grin that has sold me more trouble than he knows how to count. He stood at the counter the way he used to stand as a child when he wanted another slice of bread and jam, and thought if he didn't ask, the slice would heed his hunger. I handed him a broom. He took it. He swept. To anyone watching, we looked like a family at work. We were. We are. It is a hard kind, but it is ours. On the way to the walk-in, I caught my reflection in the glass and did not flinch. I looked like a woman whose name hangs on a sign because she got up in snow. I checked the pie case and the holder for receipts and the tape on the cash drawer and felt for the first time since the canvas went up that my wrists belong to me again. There is a kind of end to a day like that. It's not triumphant. It's tidy. I wrote tomorrow's prep list, the exact number of buns that love a Sunday after a slow Saturday, the soup that uses what needs using. I put the red folder on the office chair so I wouldn't forget to carry it to church of all places, because the lawyer wants a signature after service, and I intend to hand over what is owed to due process without asking it to ring the bell. Then I turned off the neon and left the kitchen with the kettle half filled, the way I like it. The future should have a job the moment it arrives. Next week there will be a room with a microphone and a person in a blazer who wants me to smile into a headline. Next week there will be a clipboard and a clock, and a moment when people realize glamour is a luxury item that goes out of stock in February. Next week, there will be a boy I raised trying to learn how to apologize without choking on his own pride. I can't write those parts ahead of time. What I can do is bring the papers and the manners and the muffins. I can stand in my own doorway and behave. Some conclusions don't arrive with applause. They arrive with a clipboard and the knowledge that the oven timer won't wait for anybody's feelings. I have come to believe that dignity in a small town isn't a shout. It's a posted notice, a receipt printed clean, a door that locks because you turn the key. When people you love take you for granted, the temptation is to go poetic. Most of the time, what works is arithmetic. The Friday of the soft launch was cold enough to make the parking lot sound like gravel walking under itself. I was up before 5 the way grief and kitchens agree on. The mixer beat the dough into something capable. I iced the cinnamon buns while the kettle muttered its small encouragement. I checked the probe thermometer in a mug of ice water, 0 degrees on the nose, and wrote calibrated 7:02 a.m. on a strip of masking tape, because bureaucracy is just love without the soft edges. I turned the neon sign on. Harbor Light pulsed once, then held. It looked like it had always looked, tired, hopeful, local. By 8, the morning crowd had spent their words and slid into that steady, quiet work, brings to a room. I kept the pace a little quicker than habit because I knew late afternoon would be a tangle. When the ground crew lead paid his bill, I tucked 2 of the better buns into a paper bag for the de-icers who would be fielding opinions from weather no one had invited. He protested like he always does. I pretended not to hear. We both practiced our roles. People who understand mercy gets done before anyone names it. Around 10, I set the red folder at the back of the counter and opened it to check for courage. Courage these days looks like registered mail receipts, a food safety inspection report, an email from the insurer that reads exactly as plainly as a woman could hope, and the documents my lawyer had sent, a resolution for 2 signatures on big decisions, a notice to suppliers, a revocation of authority, and the repayment schedule for the content charges. I added 2 index cards I'd written the night before in my most legible hand. The first card read, "Tonight is an inspection, not a launch." The second, "Room stays require payment in full at booking, no complimentary nights." Sometimes you have to repeat yourself to yourself before anybody else will listen. Caleb strolled in late morning with an expression he used to bring home from Pee-wee hockey when he wanted me to see his effort before I saw the score. He'd shaved. He was wearing a new hoodie with a logo that suggested boats while refusing to admit to weather. Sierra came behind him with the quick breath and busy phone of a person who believes a plan exists as soon as she speaks it. "Press at 6, she said. "We'll start at 7 with the tarp drop and then—" "We're closed 6 to 8 for inspection," I said, pointing at the sign on the staff board and then at the email pinned beside the sanitizer chart. "Signs are cute," she quipped, before looking at the email's letterhead and editing her face. Caleb tried the approach that used to work when he was 12 and wanted to stay at Davy's after supper. "Mom, we can do both. It'll make a great reel. Health inspectors love transparency." "They love logs," I said. "So do I." He pushed past humor into offense. "You're sabotaging," he muttered, not loud enough for customers, loud enough for me. "I'm safeguarding," I said, because truth prefers verbs that have proof. I handed him the broom. He took it. He swept poorly. I loved him anyway in the practical tense, by tightening the apron strings I had loosened for him last year. At 2, the inspector arrived 20 minutes ahead of schedule, which is the exact kind of kindness my life understands. She was wearing boots that looked like they had solved a few problems without announcing themselves. "Afternoon," she said softly. I showed her the logs, the hand sink, the nitrite strips, the sanitizer bucket. We tested the dish machine. We checked cooling procedures. She lifted a lid and smiled at the sight of labels that matched reality. "Allergen control?" she asked. I pointed to the sheet we had taped above the pass, the one the kids rolled their eyes at until I made them read it once a week out loud like a modest liturgy. "No pop-up bars," I added, because the word had been said in my kitchen too often these last days. She made a note and nodded without a sermon. We finished just before 5. She signed the sheet and handed me a copy with a pressure-stable smile. "You run a tight ship," she said. "Ships that won't sail have no right to be pretty," I answered, and she allowed herself the luxury of a laugh. "Good evening, Ms. McAllister," she said at the door. "Good evening," I said, grateful to be called by my own name in my own building. Sierra arrived with a box of stemless glasses and flourished a spreadsheet on her phone. "Just tiny bites," she said, making a circle with her forefinger and thumb. "Cured meats, olives, crostini. We plate them on the bar back here and—" "No," I said, pointing to the inspector's fresh signature on the report. "You need an approved prep station and allergen signage. We are not courting anaphylaxis for a reel." "It's one night," she tried. "Hives don't care about your calendar," I replied. She put the box down harder than glass likes and said nothing. Silence can be a courtesy when you cannot yet afford kindness. At 6, the reporter from the paper showed up with a camera and that polite curiosity, small towns train well. She snapped the posted inspection sheet, the sanitizer strip, the neon sign, my hands cutting bars. "Do you mind a photo of the sign?" she asked, meaning the canvas. "Photograph the whole," I said, canvas and all, and pulled the edge up a few inches so harbor light showed under Caleb's harbor. She framed it honest and clicked. "We'll let the caption do the heavy lifting," she said. I brewed her a coffee strong enough for editing at home and sent her off with a bag of end pieces, because words are easier with sugar. The first guests arrived at 6:30. Regulars curious to see what a soft launch meant when the heat bill still arrived like a fact. A cluster of Sierra's friends followed, hair done, lips glossed, phones ready. A local counselor drifted in with the look of a man hoping to be caught being generous. Caleb checked his reflection in the chrome of the espresso machine and adjusted his smile. I dried my hands on a towel and told my shoulders there would be no jumping. At 7, Sierra climbed up on the small step we keep near the pastry case to reach the top shelf. She held the mic like she believed in it and said the phrases she has learned to say in rooms that prefer adjectives: community, momentum, modern. She thanked our honorary advisor, Ruth, and gestured toward me with a sweep that resembled a blessing and felt like a theft. People clapped because they were taught to. Caleb stepped forward and reached for the canvas tarp like a magician. Founded by Caleb, 2025. The slide behind him read in a font. I did not tug the tarp from his hands. I did not take the mic and produce a speech that would satisfy the part of the internet that loves mothers when they make drama. I picked up the red folder, stepped to the little table we use for refilling sugar, and spread the papers out like a careful lunch. There is a tone of voice kitchens teach you to save, that low carrying register that calms stampedes and steers hot pans away from wrists. I borrowed it now. Before we drop anything, I said, not quite into the mic, not quite outside it, we need to confirm we are operating safely and legally. I placed the insurer's email on top where everyone could see the letterhead. Event coverage is contingent upon owner approval in the presence of the named permit holder. I tapped the inspection report, signed an hour ago by the woman with the acceptable boots. We've passed with this layout. That does not include a pop-up bar. It includes this kitchen, these hands, this pass. The room stilled in the way a room stilled at my husband's funeral when the pastor said Bill's name aloud, slowly enough for it to be both a memory and a notice. I did not hurry. I added the business registration with my name typed where names belong. This is me, I said, not honorary, owner. A few heads turned toward the canvas and then back to my hands. I added the resolution for 2 signatures and the revocation of unauthorized access to vendor accounts, cash, and the bank. From this night forward, I said, no contracts, orders, or transfers over $300 proceed without 2 signatures, mine and a second. No refunds without 2 codes. No complimentary rooms without my written authorization. I did not look at Sierra. I did not need to. The pause in her breath told me she had read enough paperwork to recognize when the tide shifts without a wave, that had been alive for less time than my mixer belt. Caleb started a laugh and didn't finish it. It fell between us and didn't bounce. Mum, he said, going for charm because charm has served him like a coat he never had to buy. We can talk about this in the back. We will, I said. After the news and in front of the people this affects. I slid the repayment schedule onto the table. Charges on the supplementary card not related to operations come to this amount. Here's the schedule. It's reasonable, because I wrote it on a day I liked you. The room did an imperfect thing. I could feel people trying to look away and look at the same time. Nobody filmed, which is the kindest thing Gander has ever done for me. The counselor put both hands flat on the pastry case, as if trying to learn a new kind of prayer. Sierra rallied. We're talking about a brand, she said, tight, almost pleading. A new era. We're talking about a business, I said, because brand is a scarf, and business is a coat. I have customers who expect hot soup and quiet rooms. I have an inspector's signature that holds us safer than a slogan will. The name on the grant, the permit, the insurance, the registration, all of them say Harbor Light and Ruth McAllister. No canvas can change that without my consent. I do not consent. I could have ended there. The temptation to count coup and take the applause that wasn't quite mine pressed at my ribs. Instead, I turned the page in the folder to the notice to suppliers and held up the registered mail receipts like a woman showing baptismal papers at a family reunion where the arguments come salted. Roaster and flour have been told. No orders without my signature. Public Health has our inspection on file. The insurer's underwriter has our email. The bank has dual signatures on transfers. If we drop a tarp tonight, it will be to check the paint behind it for flaking. A laugh rose from somewhere decent and relieved, the way laughter sounds when it climbs out of a ditch. The band, God bless them, found a chord that didn't have to be brave to be supportive. The reporter took 2 photos without a flash. Fast hands, respectful eyes. There was a beat then in which I had to say something to my son that would feel like both a boundary and a bridge. I picked up the letter I had written the night before and slid it across the sugar station, not into his chest like a reprimand, but into his hands like a tool. "Here are the terms if you want to stay in this with me," I said. "Repay the card on the schedule. Finish the short course in small business management at the college. I paid the deposit because I am still your mother. Work 12 months without touching vendor accounts, bank transfers, or comp rooms. We'll review in a year. Until then, you run the front and make people feel wanted. You're good at that, Caleb. I'll run the back and keep the oven and the books honest. We will put both our names under the word owner when it is true." His mouth worked the way mouths do when their favorite habits lose their sponsor. He nodded once and looked at his shoes like they might be able to take this step for him. They couldn't. Sierra set the mic down. She lifted the canvas a corner and then let it fall. "Do you want me to call it off?" she asked, voice brittle but careful. "Call off the bar," I said. "Musician can play, people can sit, we'll serve coffee, tea, and bars. If anyone asks about the sign, we'll tell them the truth. The sign says Harbor Light, because that's what pays the flour bill." She took a breath that sounded like a person trying not to cry on television and nodded. "Okay," she said. "Okay." She walked to the band, said a sentence I didn't hear, and the guitarist started a song built for rooms that have done their chores. The people sat. The phones went away. We served coffee with a steadier hand than the mornings. I gave the counselor a bar on the town, and he joked he'd declare a conflict of interest. The ground crew split a plate and left a tip larger than the bill, because men who work with weather understand what storms are worth. A teenage dishwasher I'm training to manage in June refilled the sugar caddies with the seriousness usually reserved for subtracting on paper. The reporter raised her cup toward me once from the far end of the counter and then left without a fuss. If she wrote a story, I hoped it would be about how rooms recover when someone chooses order over drama. At 8:15, after the coffee pots had cooled and the air had lost its jitters, I asked the players to pause. I stepped up on Sierra's step, my step now, and spoke in the voice I used to end a shift without ending a friendship. "Thank you for letting us be a little boring," I said. "This place is named Harbor Light because it was built to help people find the door. Tonight we remembered that a light doesn't need a drum roll. It needs a bulb that isn't burned out and a hand that pays the bill. We'll be open the way we have been, early, honest, and warm. If you've got ideas, bring them with a budget. If you've got a complaint, bring it with your name. If you've got a son you love, pray for him. It helps." They laughed where laughter was safe and clapped where clapping didn't embarrass anyone. We closed by 10. The band packed fast. The counselor wiped his own table because his mother raised him right. Sierra gathered her glasses and her dignity without breaking either. Caleb took the mop from Lila without making it look like charity. When the last customer waved from the door, I locked it and leaned my forehead against the glass for exactly the length of a small prayer that had nothing to do with religion and everything to do with relief. In the office, I slid the new documents into sleeves and wrote with a blue Sharpie across the tab, "Resolution in force." I printed a short notice for the bulletin board by the register. Effective immediately. Orders over $300 require 2 signatures. The night softened. No complimentary rooms without written authorization by Ruth McAllister. Vent service limited to approved kitchen areas. We serve coffee, tea, bars, and what the oven and health permit provide. Thank you for respecting the work. I taped it up and stood back the way you stand back from a cake you are fairly sure won't fall. You asked for my comment at the end, so here it is, tidy as a till. My son took me for granted because I let gratitude do a job that belongs to governance. He thought kindness was bottomless, and in my quiet way, I encouraged that thought by filling the bottom every time it showed. It isn't that he's a bad man. He's a man who had never been required to say the price out loud before he picked up the thing he wanted. People like that don't learn by being shamed in public. They learn by being asked to sign where the line is and pay where the bill comes. Shame is noise. Paper is a system. I chose the system. I didn't take revenge. I took back the things with my name on them, the way a weather-worn woman takes back her coat from a crowded hook and says, "No, not this time." I gave my son a path, not a humiliation. He may walk it, he may not. Either way, the kitchen will open, the rooms will be quiet, the inspection report will be on the corkboard, and the sign will say Harbor Light because the light is meant to be about what it does, not who poses under it. If the story did anything for you, if it laid a hand on your shoulder where boundaries live, tell me. Like this, if it made your spine a little straighter. Subscribe if you want more small, stubborn stories about mothers who keep places alive with receipts and recipes. And comment, have you ever had to take back something that had your name on it, without yelling, just with paper? What did you file, who signed, and what changed after? If it rings true, share it with someone who thinks honorary is a gift and not a way of moving a woman off her own stage. I'll be here next week, God willing, and the power bill paid, with another story about work that looks too quiet to be the miracle it is.